this is Warhawk Beyond 2040, and welcome to another edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal album review series. And today I'm going to be taking a look at the amazing and impressive catalogue from one of the most important and underrated bands to ever burst onto the scene in the progressive metal genre. And this band are not very well known to a lot of people, unless you are fans of Dream Theater and Fates Warning. And this band features various members from Dream Theater and Fates Warning, as well as guest contributions from a who's who of progressive rock and progressive metal. And during this band's existence, they made a lot of incredible and wild music during the 2000s. And after their breakup in 2012, this band earned itself a reputation as one of the most important bands of the 2000s, and over the years has quietly earned itself a loyal following. And this is a band that I've been wanting to talk about on this series for quite a while now. And I'm really looking forward to be discussing this band's amazing catalogue of albums. And the band that I'm talking about needs no introduction whatsoever. I am talking about, of course, the one and only American progressive metal band, OSI. Now, some of you are probably wondering, what's OSI? Who are OSI? I have never heard of OSI. OSI was a studio project that was formed in 2002 by guitarist Jim Matheos from Fates Warning. And then later on, it became a collaboration between Matheos and former Dream Theater keyboardist Kevin Moore. Now, Jim Matheos and Kevin Moore are no strangers to one another. They have played and collaborated with each other in a number of different situations and various projects. Kevin Moore has played with Fates Warning, and Jim Matheos has also contributed to Kevin Moore's project Chroma Key. So these two guys know each other very well. And of course, Dream Theater and Fates Warning toured together for a number of years. And while Kevin Moore and Jim Matheos are very much at the forefront of OSI, they have also had guest contributions from a who's who of progressive rock and progressive metal, guys such as Stephen Wilson and Gavin Harrison from Porcupine Tree, Sean Malone from Cynic and Gordian Knot, Joe Vera, Jim Matheos' bandmate from Fates Warning, Tim Bowness from No Man, Mikko Ackerfeldt from Opeth, and of course, Kevin Moore's former Dream Theater bandmate, Mike Portnoy. So a pretty impressive cast of all-star acts from progressive rock and progressive metal. And the music of OSI is, of course, very rooted in progressive metal and progressive rock. But there's also influences of ambience, electronica, and at times it's very dark and very atmospheric. And the music is very experimental. And when you hear OSI, sometimes you might mistake them to be either Dream Theater or Fates Warning. And a lot of that is due to the fact that you've got two key men from both Dream Theater and Fates Warning. But over the course of time, OSI have built themselves up with their own voice and their own original musical identity. And for today's special edition, I am going to be discussing the entire catalogue of OSI, which is a total of 5 albums, 4 studio albums, and 1 EP. And as always, I'm going to be talking about each album individually, and I'll be choosing which one I think is the best one. I've just finished listening to the entire catalogue of OSI. Now, this is going to be pretty tough because all of these albums are remarkably strong. There are no bad ones whatsoever. Although, obviously, there are couple of albums that I feel are a little bit better than others. But I think what you're going to learn to appreciate and respect with OSI is they're all excellent, they're all well produced, they're all different, but they're all very enjoyable. So if you're fans of Dream Theater and Fates Warning, or you're a fan of progressive metal in general, I think you're going to like what you're going to hear here because this is a remarkably strong catalogue of music. So we're going to start with the first album, and this one came out in 2003, and this one is called Office of Strategic Influence. So this is OSI's debut album, and if you're OSI, you couldn't ask for a much better and stronger first impression than this one. Now, I had heard this album before, but not all of it. It had been a long time since I heard this one. So, after listening to this one in its entirety, I was absolutely blown away by how good this album really was. At times, it sounds like Dream Theater. At times, it sounds like Fates Warning. There are even little moments it sounds like Porcupine Tree for one obvious reason, of course. But there is some incredible kick ass music. There's even little moments it sounds like Cynic and Gordian Knot, which, of course, for one other obvious reason. But above all else, this was very enjoyable and a great listening experience. And if you're a fan of Dream Theater or Fates Warning, or you just like progressive metal in general, there is no better album I could highly recommend more than this album, Office of Strategic Influence. It's absolutely dynamite stuff and really delivers a mega punch. So we're just going to have a quick look. There's the passport. I like how the whole album looks like one big gigantic passport. There we go. So all of the music is written and composed by Kevin Moore and Jim Matheos. And we've got the lyrics. Now, while there are vocals on this album, they're more like spoken words, and a lot of that is provided by Kevin Moore, and he creates this very robotic, drone like voice through his vocoder. So it gives it more of a darker, atmospheric feel to the music. But listening to this album, just really showed you how important Kevin Moore was on those early Dream Theater albums, and you can really hear that influence very clearly. And there's the guys as well, and there's more shots of the guys. So OSI on this album features Kevin Moore on keyboards and vocals, Jim Matheos on guitars, Sean Malone on bass and Chapman stick, and Mike Portnoy on drums. And we've also got one guest contribution from Stephen Wilson as well. Can't really go wrong with a band like that. And as I said, this album absolutely rocks. So we've got the first track, the new Math, What He Said, absolutely kick-ass opener. And then we got the title track, OSI, which is excellent. When You're Ready is brilliant. Horseshoes and B-52s is another great track. Head is great. Hello Helicopter is excellent. Shutdown, which features Stephen Wilson on vocals, really gives it that Porcupine Tree flavour. One of the best tracks on this album and one of my favourites too. Absolutely brilliant. Dirt's from a Holy Place is great. Memory, Daydreams, Lapses is great. And Standby Looks Like Rain, another great track as well. And then we've got Free bonus tracks as well. Set the controls for The Heart of the Sun, which is pretty much a Pink Floyd cover. New Mama, which is a Neil Young track. And then we've got the big, long, epic instrumental, The Thing That Never Was, which is probably the best track of the bonus disc, in my opinion. And the standout tracks for me on disc one are The New Math, OSI, Hello Helicopter, Shutdown, which is probably my favourite track of the entire album, Memory Daydreams Lapses, and Standby Looks Like Rain. And my favourite track on the bonus disc is The Thing That Never Was, which is like 17 minutes long. Doesn't get any better than that. Kevin Moore, with that Dream Theater like style of keyboard playing, is all over this album. Jim Matheos just absolutely ripping it up on guitars. Sean Malone, just an absolute kick-ass bass player, really brings that cynic synergy to the music. And Mike Portnoy, he just brings that monstrous power that we all know and love him for from Dream Theater. He's just all over this album with a massive presence, and top to bottom, a monstrous album and a very strong debut, in my opinion. So there you have it. Office of Strategic Influence. Excellent album and very enjoyable, and highly recommended to all Dream Theater and Fates Warning and Porcupine Tree fans as well. Absolutely love this one. Tremendous album. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2006, and this one is called Free. So Free is a follow-up to OSI's debut album, and it features the return of Mike Portnoy back on drums, but this time he is credited as a session musician as opposed to a full-time band member as he was on the first album. Sean Malone is gone, and stepping into his shoes on bass is Joey Vera, Jim Matheos' Fates Warning bandmate. And what more can you say, really? This album is an excellent follow up to OSI's debut, and it just absolutely kicks ass. Now, whereas OSI's debut album was much more in traditional progressive metal, Free is still very much rooted in that genre, but it's totally different to the first album. The music on this one is a lot more experimental, but still very enjoyable. Kevin Moore brings a lot of that haunting vocals that he can only deliver, and he brings, of course, that Dream Theater like quality with his keyboard playing. Jim Matheos absolutely ripping it up on guitar. Mike Portnoy, a badass as always, behind the drums, bringing that power as only he can deliver. And Joey Vera proving to be a worthy successor of Sean Malone. He just is rock solid on the bass. Although I prefer Sean Malone, but I feel Joey Vera did a great job filling Malone's shoes very well. And this is really cool because having Kevin Moore and Mike Portnoy together again, it's kind of like having a little Dream Theater reunion, because these two playing together marked the first time since 1994's Dream Theater Awake album that Kevin Moore and Mike Portnoy had played and collaborated together. And it's quite clear when you hear these two playing, you could hear that classic Dream Theater magic, which was so synonymous with the band's first three albums. And it's really nice to hear that again, albeit in a very different context. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. For me, that was the highlights of this entire OSI catalogue, was just having that Dream Theater reunion with Kevin Moore and Mike Portnoy. Absolutely loved it. So we're just going to have a quick look. Okay, so we've got the lyrics, and we've got more lyrics here as well. There we are. Some very ominous artwork and more lyrics here too. And more lyrics, and there's Kevin Moore. More lyrics there, and there's Jim Matheos. And more lyrics too. And there's Kevin Moore and Jim Matheos. So we've got Jim Matheos on guitars, keyboards, and programming, Kevin Moore on vocals, keyboards, and programming, and we've got Joey Vera on bass and Mike Portnoy on drums, and we've also got Bijay Akadenis on guitars and vocals on one track, and all of the music is written and composed by Jim Matheos and Kevin Moore, except for one track which was composed by Jim Matheos and one track which was composed by Kevin Moore and one track which was credited and composed by Akadenis. Excellent stuff, very enjoyable, and Free is of course a special double album. So we've got the first track, Sure You Will, which is just a kick-ass opener. Free, which is the title track, excellent. Go is another great track. All Gone Now is great. Home Was Good is brilliant. Bigger Wave is great. Kicking is great. Better is really good. Simple Life is, which is one of my favourite tracks on this album. Once is great, and Our Town is great. And then on the bonus disc we got OSI, which is great. Set It On Fire is great. Communicators is great. When You're Ready, which is a demo, and Remain Calm is great, and Old War. From top to bottom, absolutely enjoyable, lots of kick-ass material, and everyone really brings their A game. And the standouts for me on disc one are Sure You Will, All Gone Now, Home Was Good, Kicking, Simple Life, Once, and Our Town. And the standouts for me on the bonus disc are Set It On Fire and Communicators is great, and Old War and Remain Calm. But tremendous follow up to OSI's debut album. So there you have it. Free. Absolutely enjoyable. Love this one so much. Equally as good as OSI's debut. Tremendous stuff. So we move on to the next album, and this one also came out in 2006, and it's an EP, and this one is called Refree. So, as I mentioned, Refree is an EP, and it features 3 tracks which are remixed by Kevin Moore, and there's no other featured musicians. This is pretty much, you could call it a Kevin Moore solo album, and it features Kevin Moore on keyboards in experimental mode, coming up with lots of different synth sounds, textures, and soundscapes. And the music on this EP could have worked as maybe for a computer game soundtrack or a PC game soundtrack, because there's not really much to get your teeth into. If you're a fan of just hearing experimentation keyboard music, then you probably would like this one. Nothing wrong with it. I love Kevin Moore. He's a really good keyboard player, and he knows how to come up with lots of different riffs and melodies. But in all honesty, as much of a fan as I am of Kevin Moore, I feel that this album, you know, is probably the weakest of the OSI catalogue. And that's not me saying that this album is bad. It's okay, but it just sounds like demo tracks for an OSI album. It's not really a band album as such. As I said, it's pretty much a Kevin Moore solo album, but it's okay. It's not terrible, but I found this one to be all right in some spots. Some of it did drag on a little bit, and there were moments I felt it wasn't really going anywhere. But that's not knocking Kevin Moore. He's outstanding and he is amazing on this album. But I don't know really. I felt maybe this could have been a little bit better, but this doesn't make it a clunker. Far from it. It's just maybe not as strong as the other albums on this catalogue. So we've got Go, Console Remix, Kicking, which is also a Kevin Moore remix, and Home Was Good, a Kevin Moore remix. I wouldn't really have a standout track that I liked. They're all okay, but nothing special here. But if I had to choose one that I did enjoy, it's probably the first track, the console remix of Go. I thought that was quite good, but the rest of it, it's okay, but nothing special. But as I said, I feel that there are other albums that are a little bit better. So there you have it. Re 3. Enjoyable for what it was, but nothing special here, in my honest opinion. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2009, and it's a double album, and this one is called Blood. Excellent album, really strong, really dark, really heavy, and above all else, really enjoyable. So Mike Portnoy is gone, and behind the drum kit for this album is Gavin Harrison from Porcupine Tree, who really kicks a lot of ass on this album. Don't get me wrong, I miss Mike Portnoy. You know, I thought he really brought a lot of power and muscle to the first two OSI albums, but I can tell you now, Gavin Harrison is no slouch. He is right up there with Mike Portnoy as one of the best drummers in the world, and he just absolutely demolishes this album. He is just all over this album. He's got a massive presence, and he just knows how to play for the song. He really does. So we've got guest vocal appearances from Mikael Åkerfeldt from Opeth and Tim Bonis from No Man. And we've got Jim Matheos also doubling on guitars and bass as well. So Jerry Vera and Sean Malone are both gone. So now OSI is very much the Jim Matheos and Kevin Moore show. So they're pretty much at the forefront, especially on this album. And Gavin Harrison, although he is a session musician on this album, he is very much right up there with those two. So they pretty much make up the core of this album. But holy cow, this is excellent stuff. At times it sounds like Opeth, which is no surprise, but at the same time, it's very much OSI's own thing. You know, they're not trying to be Dream Theater, they're not trying to be Fates Warning. By this point, now they've got their own voice and now they've got their own musical identity. And Kevin Moore and Jim Matheos are just on top form as always, with lots of blistering guitar work and lots of dark, atmospheric, and ambient keyboard work from Kevin Moore. What more can you say, really? Tremendous stuff. So we're just going to have a quick look. Very ominous there. So there's the lyrics. And there's the lyrics as well. So all of the music is, of course, written and composed by Jim Matheos and Kevin Moore. And lyrics are all written and provided by Kevin Moore. Good stuff here. And there's more lyrics. Love the artwork here. It's very dark and very ominous. I love it. Absolutely love it. And here we are. Love it. Absolutely gorgeous artwork. Not just on this album, but on all their albums. So we've got the first track, The Escape Artist, which is an excellent opener. And then we've got Terminal, which is another great track as well. False Start is great. We Come Undone is great. Radiolog is great. Be the Hero, brilliant. Microburst Alert, one of my favourite tracks from this album. Stockholm, which features a guest vocal Appearance from Mikael Åkerfeldt, another great track as well. And we've got the title track, Blood. And then on disc two, we've got No Celebrations, which features a guest vocal appearance from Tim Bones from No Man. And then we've got a cover of Elliott Smith, Christian Brothers. And then we've got Terminal Endless, which is like over 10 minutes long. But top to bottom, some very strong material and absolutely brilliant and a great follow up to Free, in my opinion. And the standout tracks for me are The Escape Artist, Terminal, We Come Undone, Stockholm, and Blood. And the standout for me on disc two is Terminal Endless. Excellent album, great material from top to bottom, and damn, what more can you say? Just damn, what a band. What a great album. Absolutely love this one. So there you have it. Blood, great album from OSI and a great successor to Free, in my opinion. Absolutely love this one. Absolute kick ass album. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2012, and this one is called Fire Make Thunder. So this is the final OSI album, but I tell you what, it's a banger. They really go out on a real high. No other guest contributions. This is very much a power trio affair. So we've got Kevin Moore on keyboards and vocals, Jim Matheos on guitars, bass, and keyboards as well, and a bit of programming. And Gavin Harrison is back again on drums. And for me, this is some of Gavin Harrison's best drumming. You know, he really fits in very nicely with OSI. As I said earlier, I do miss Mike Portnoy, because of the whole Dream Theater connection that him and Kevin Moore share. But Gavin Harrison, he really fills Mike Portnoy's shoes very well and really came up with his own voice for OSI's music. So you could kind of say he was like the third man in a way, because, you know, although Mike Portnoy was a big part of the first two albums, I feel Gavin Harrison really made OSI more his own thing. So you could kind of look at this as two bands sharing the same name. It's really good, and I thought Gavin Harrison did an excellent job with the music. So all of the compositions are written and composed by Jim Matheos and Kevin Moore, with the exception of one track, which was co-composed by Jim Matheos, Kevin Moore, and Gavin Harrison. And all of the lyrics are written and provided by Kevin Moore. Excellent stuff. I thought this was very enjoyable and really feels like a real power trio affair, in my opinion. So we're going to have a quick look. So there are the lyrics. And there they are, the dynamic duo behind OSI. And more lyrics as well. I have to say though, one thing about OSI, I love their album covers. They're all different, but they're all so cool. But I do like this one, though. It's very, very cool album cover, as are all of them. So we've got the first track, Cold Call, which is a great opener. Guards is another great track. Indian Curse is another. Enemy of Prayer, which is the co-composition with Gavin Harrison. One of my favourite tracks on this album. Wind Won't Howl is a great track. Big Chief 2 is great. For Nothing is excellent. And Invisible Men is another great track as well. But the whole album, top to bottom, is very strong and very enjoyable. And what more can you say, really? When you get Kevin Moore, Jim Matheos, and Gavin Harrison, you're getting the absolute best. And I liked what Gavin Harrison did on this album. He really made OSI feel like his own thing. Don't get me wrong, I do miss Mike Portnoy, but I feel that Gavin Harrison with all due respect to Mike Portnoy, I feel Gavin Harrison really made OSI feel like a real band. And I'm not saying Mike Portnoy didn't, but obviously I liked what Mike Portnoy did because the whole Dream Theater connection with him and Kevin Moore that made those first two albums really special. But I felt with the last two, Gavin Harrison made OSI feel like a real band. And you could kind of say OSI had two bands. You had the band with Mike Portnoy, and then you got the band with Gavin Harrison. Both share the same name, but both different. But I think that's what makes this catalogue so good, that all of these albums are different, but they're all very whatsoever. They're just all different. They've all got their own identity. So the standout tracks for me are Cold Call, Enemy Prayer, For Nothing, and Invisible Men. Great album, excellent one. Sadly, this would be the final album we would get from OSI, as Kevin Moore would pretty much walk away and retire from music for good, and is now a doctor in Long Island with his own clinic. Why not? And Jim Matheos, of course, he's doing lots of different projects. And of course, Gavin Harrison, he's playing with everyone, and he's currently a member of Pineapple Thief, so not bad. So there you have it. Fire, Make Thunder. Sadly, the final OSI album, but what a way to go out. An absolute banger. Love this one. Very good, strong album, in my opinion. Good stuff. So, which OSI album do I think is the best one? Well, after listening to the entire catalogue in preparation for this was very tough because I enjoyed all of these albums. I think all of them were great. Obviously, there are a couple that I felt were a little bit better than others. I felt that Refree was probably the weakest of the entire catalogue. It was still good for what it was, but it really didn't do much for me. But the rest of the catalogue, absolutely tremendous. Any of these OSI albums could easily be a number one or an all time favourite. But for me personally, if I had to choose one, which I felt was the best one, I am definitely going with the debut, Office of Strategic Influence. I thought this album really kicked ass, really made a huge impression. As I said at the beginning, I had heard this album before, but not all of it all the way through. It had been a long time, so to hear this again, but this time in its entirety, it really made a huge impression on me. It absolutely blew me away. And just to hear Kevin Moore and Mike Portnoy back together again, that classic Dream Theater magic from the band's first three albums was the icing on the cake. Sean Malone from Cynic, he was just a badass on the bass and Chapman stick. He really made the music feel beefed up, and Jim Matheos just absolutely ripped it up on the guitars. And Stephen Wilson, even though he only featured on one track, he really brought that Porcupine Tree element to the music, which for me just made it even better. So that's why I'm going with OSI's debut album, Office of Strategic Influence. I just thought this was a really good album and really spoke to me a lot. And it's just a classic progressive metal album, in my opinion. If you like progressive metal, if you like Dream Theater or Fates Warning or Porcupine Tree, highly recommend this one. Absolutely incredible. And had this been OSI's only album, my opinion would still stay the same. Still regard this as an all time classic. So there you have it. Office of Strategic Influence, for my money, OSI's best album, in my opinion. Absolutely love this one. What a tremendous album. Really kicked ass. Love it. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What's your favourite OSI album? Is it Office of Strategic Influence, Free, Refree, Blood, or fire make thunder? There's no right or wrong answer. We all have our favourite albums. You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below. And I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal album review series. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.